Okay.
Okay, cool. I think we are recording, Reggie. So,
Yeah.
um, Reggie, I know we've been talking, for a while now, but nevertheless, thank you for jumping on this project with me on trying to capture conversations of friends of TK remembering his life and works, right? And the hope is to have an informal conversation. And I don't quite know who the future uh, subscriber to this content would be. It could be just my kids, just to understand who their grandfather was. It could be someone else who might want to understand, what TK did and what his life was like. It could be some future student a decade, 2 decades from now. But whatever who the future person might be, for my own sake, just to remember and to learn about my dad. I think that's my primary motivator as a selfish reason. I feel like he spent a lot more time with his colleagues and friends than he did at the family. So this is my journey to rediscovering, my dad. He was a great storyteller. I loved a lot of the stories he said, but I wish I had a better memory, and I wish I remembered all the details. And this is a way of me trying to create a tool to go back and revisit some of the stories. So that's my personal motivation. But before we go on further, Reggie, maybe it's good for anyone listening to first know about yourself, Reggie. Do you want to maybe introduce yourself and
Yeah,
tell us what you do?
I think that's better because, uh, well, I am um, I was a student of TK from probably 90 to 93, 92 to 93. Yeah, while I was doing my MPhil degree in Gandhigram. Thereafter, I went on to do my doctorate in IIT Bombay and worked on various vocations, mostly in development sector. And I also teach in Tata Institute of Social Science as a professor of practice on a couple of programs, mostly teaching labor, economics, and sustainable development. And my association with the TK also would have been more in uh, later in life. While he was the director of MGRI, I was also associated with him when he was the vice chancellor um, in Chitrakoot University, later in MGIRI, and far later in his longer endeavor in Maharogi Seva Samiti. So that's my background. So I am, as of now, I continue to be a member of the general body of the management board of the Maharogi Seva Samiti, and also a guest faculty or adjunct faculty in Tata Institute of Social Science.
Yes, so and you said you first met TK in 1992. I feel like I met you at the same time when I was probably in 10th grade and visited Gandhigram during the holidays, and I
No,
recall having met you first
yeah.
then.
In fact, I have met TK 1 year prior to that.
Okay.
I was a student in Mahatma Gandhi University in Kottayam. During my second year, TK came there as a uh, board member of board of studies of the department program. And while he was there, he gave a lecture to the master's students. And probably my first meeting was then and there, and I was pretty much impressed by what he was speaking. And I was a student of Gandhian thought at that point of time. And I was also fascinated to see a technocrat, and none less than a IITian, plunged into the rural development activity and more like a practicing Gandhian. So I was fascinated. So once my master's degree was finished, my opportunities for higher education was either to go for a PhD or for an MPhil. And at that point of time, I decided to take the slower route, take an MPhil, get a feel of the area. So I, um, by the time I was looking at places and opportunity people, and one of the first name came to my mind was TK. So I made a trip to Gandhigram prior to the admission process. Thought of meeting him, and I was also fascinated by the idea of a rural technology center because I knew TK as the director of the rural technology center. I was also fascinated at that point of time with the concept of a rural university, and that is a time when I was dabbling. My thinking was more on sustainable agriculture, natural farming, and areas like that. So the rural development, rural university has fascinated me. I went there. Then I came to realize that the university has ran programs like micro level planning, future studies, which is a totally random program. I mean, it didn't survive a lot. I mean, it was there for a few years. And the TK was a faculty in both. And they also had a MPhil in Gandhian thought. But by the time I've decided I'm done with Gandhian thought by doing a master's degree, joined the future studies program, and that's it. He was teaching us technology forecasting, EIA, technology assessment, and papers to do with the technology and management, project management, and stuff like that. So that is my the longer interaction, and that's probably the period where I met you also.
Yeah, yeah, I certainly remember that. Maybe it'll be good to understand a little bit here, Reggie. You said you were surprised to see a technocrat, talk about Gandhian ideas. Could you maybe give a little bit of context here, and do you recall what his first presentation was about in Kottayam?
It was about more about rural technology, appropriate technology. I mean, he was trying to tell us the difference between the economies of scale, where a large scale industry versus how it affects the employment
Hmm.
and the resource use, and I mean associated issues. Whereas if you have a technology which, and yeah, essentially he was also trying to say it is the large scale industry which is taking the employment away from the rural area, because these exist in different realms. So he
Hmm.
was essentially pushing for as a technocrat, he was essentially pushing for an appropriate technology. And he also probably introduced the concept at that point of time, E.F. Schumacher, what his writing, and it's a very short 1 hour talk.
Yeah,
And how the community, when the community is in charge of technology, versus a large scale industry when it is in control of technology. So that's what probably fascinated me. I mean, that these are the area where I was not an engineer and never had any prior. I was a physics graduate with a digital electronics background prior to that. So absolutely no, I mean, idea about how the society functions and what are the issues there. And by the time masters, I got fascinated with the farming. But then the technology factor, the story what he was telling fascinated me. That was and then his own couple of experiments at that point of time in RTC, the Rural Technology Center, he was explaining it. Altogether, it was a 40 minutes talk, probably.
understood. I guess it's you know good to understand both for myself, also for others. This what was Gandhigram like? Maybe you can give people a brief background about Gandhigram and what drew you there as a place, because it seems like a sleepy little university, from a kid's perspective. I remember visiting as a tenth grade student. And so what drew you there? So
No, to me, one of the thing was I was a graduate already in Gandhian thought. So this is one of the very few universities having a program in Gandhian studies, and probably that is one of the very few places with a focus on rural development. and mind you, this is a time my interest was more on the rural development aspect, the rural aspect of it actually. So having be seeing a university specifically standing for the rural issues also appealed to me. And when I went to visit TK, it was a total surprise for me. It's
Hmm.
almost like walking into a village, just like a village. And for me, I lived most of my life in a pretty much a remote village. So I could pretty much easily, you know, get into the place without a culture shock. It's pretty much like going from my village to the next village.
Understood.
Right. Yeah, it's
And
a. Mm.
I didn't realize that this about you. I guess I didn't know that you had done a physics and electronics undergraduate as well. And so, what drew you to Gandhian thought? Really? This was, I imagine, prior to meeting my dad.
No, actually, I was. I started working after my degree. I have a PG diploma. I don't have a postgraduate degree. More as a sales engineer.
Hmm.
I worked in Delhi for a year, and I visited institutions like NPL, as National Physical Laboratories, Solid State Physical Laboratories, IIT. So I was, and till that time, my education was in ordinary colleges, like in a college, and of course, my PG was from a slightly better college, the Madras Christian College. So academy fascinated at that point, started fascinating me at that point of time, and after seeing institutions like IIT, JNU, I visited those places to supply equipments, like more like plotters, printers. Those I was a sales engineer. So then I thought it's probably high time I should really think about studying. And I was not into. By the time I was totally fascinated about studying society, people, or something to do with people. So I was trying to secure admission in program in Australia at that point of time, in college in counseling, because these are the kind of courses you could get in without too much of a prior social science background. So the program I remember was MA in counseling in somewhere in Victoria. But for whatever reasons, I quit my job in Delhi, decided to pursue this thing, and it was slightly economically demanding for me, for my parents as well. So I was also looking at alternatives, and that is exactly the time the Gandhian Studies program was announced in Kerala on a newspaper. So I didn't have any specific affinity to that. But after seeing the course description, I felt this is not a bad idea. I get a larger exposure to, I mean, multiple areas of social science. So I applied there, and there was a written test interview, all that, and I could clear without much trouble. So that's it. So I joined. So that is what how I came from physics, digital electronics to Gandhian thought. It's
Understood.
kind
It's
of
almost like,
accident.
yeah, it's an accident. I guess like it's not where you discovered a book and were drawn into Gandhian thought. It's
Yeah.
almost an accident. That's how interesting. And the course, the future studies that you took at Gandhigram, was that something that PK helped to put together?
No, this is at that point of time, the UGC had a mandate.
Hmm.
They were looking at innovative transdisciplinary programs. And the future studies was in a way try to understand the uh, the technology, so forecasting, environmental impact assessment kind of areas, and also try to understand sustainable development, the concept of sustainability. And this is at a very nascent stage, 92. It's
Hmm.
very much the whole literature on sustainable development just being developed. So that's a very early stage. So this was a UGC supported program. So they created some 10 centers of future studies across various universities. And that larger course content fascinated me because that is the kind of areas which I was talking about, stuff like sustainability in agriculture development. So that is why I preferred to join the futures studies than micro level planning. That is where, in fact, the micro level planning is where TK had a larger role.
Understood. That's
Mm.
yeah. Certainly remember. I feel like there was some brochure or some manuscript he was working on about micro level planning that I don't remember any of the details of. But I also remember, like, I guess Gandhigram was a place where he started a lot of different experiments, right? Like at the RTC. Do you have intimate knowledge of those, Raji? Do you feel like you can speak to that?
Yeah, I could. So by the time I reached Gandhigram, already TK would have spent um, 3 4 years in Gandhigram. It could be more. That's probably need to look back and check. So by the time he had established the Rural Technology Center, and prior to that, probably it would have been initiated by Dr. Devendra Kumar, and TK would have come to take charge as the director. I'm not sure whether TK would have instituted that
That's
department.
correct. I think it was already in place as
Yeah,
in some form, and my understanding or estimate is that he started his interactions at Gandhigram starting 89, 88, thereabouts,
yeah,
and took leave of absence from IIT maybe 91 is or 92 is my understanding.
possible. And that is uh, partly due to Dr. Devendra Kumar, who was the vice chancellor at that point of time. And TK was very closely associated with Devendra Kumar from his IIT days. And again, rural technology, same course.
Hmm.
So I think he played a role in bringing TK as the director of Rural Technology Center. So there, by the time I have reached, quite a few, there was a large hall, if you remember, that 40 by 60 kind of a hall, full of equipments for demonstration. So some of them, or many of them, would have been influenced or directly developed by TK, because he was running a machine shop, fabrication place. So there were, my memory was some decork, the peanut shelling machines were there.
Hmm.
Most of them are like either it's extremely low power consuming ones or manually operated ones. This one could have been a hand rotating drum which would decorticate or shell a peanut. So a couple more machines I remember there. I don't exactly. But then the other designs, what he managed to popularize was a rural ambulance on a bicycle. Two models. One, I mean, these are specifically meant for interior villages where there is absolutely no major road connectivity, where people actually use bicycles. So one of the models, a patient could be kept in prone position till you come to a main road. Two versions I remember. One would have been, I don't exactly remember, but I remember a couple of designs of rural ambulances.
Hmm.
And they got a lot of attention, but I doubt whether they got into real application at any point of time, because I remember a lot of people coming, taking a lot of interest, and a few would have been manufactured anyway, but not
Hmm.
in any large scale. Then the next thing was he has again designed a few vending carts.
Hmm.
For he was also instrumental in setting up a society called Sarvo,
Hmm.
SARVO. That is some society for something something.
I feel
Uh,
like it was societal action for.
exactly, you can fill it.
I'll have to go look this up. He was very
Action,
good at coming up with
rural,
acronyms.
voluntary something. Mm.
Hmm.
So he
I remember
used.
about the cart, Reggie. Sorry to interrupt. I remember he was very fascinated by the Tindakal cart. I remember him talking to us when we were kids about that and how one had to steer this really heavy cart with one lever, which was which had very poor mechanical advantage. and but it was very widely used. It was the dominant design of push cart in all of Tindikal,
Yeah.
and I think that's what inspired him to come up with this alternate design. That's the background, though I'm not familiar with what he actually designed.
Actually, the traditional design is where you push with your both your hand, and when you have to turn, there is a steering rod
Hmm.
where you turn it left or right to change the direction. So while doing that, you won't be able to put all your force into the pushing. So you will lose half your energy into turning it. So what
Hmm.
he did instead, he made the pushing and turning into a single handle. So you can push as well as steer with both hands without losing momentum. So that was one of the designs.
And this is
Apart
the
from
four-wheel cart, right, Reggie?
there are the four-wheel carts. There's
Right.
two smaller wheels in the, I mean, closer wheels in the front, and typically you would be able to carry a couple hundred kilos of load on that, could be even more.
Understood.
But he had made a model again in this place in Varda. I was also part of the fabrication. I remember going to the local welding shop, picking up tires from the scooter, that scrap dealer. So we made it. It is far heavier because that was used for carrying mud from place to place in the campus, etc. So,
Understood.
so those vending cart, this push cart, rural ambulance. Um, of course, he also had some other couple more innovations which I can't remember at the moment in Gandhigram. But there, the larger story is under the servo, he started pushing products, the jam, the juice, um, and the pushcart was put into action. The women's group
Hmm.
would be, selling fruit juices and jam and a couple of products. And one of the major production in that was the tutti frutti.
I remember that. Yeah,
Mhm.
I
So
certainly remember visiting
it's
the
not many
villages with.
technology was involved in tutti
Yeah.
frutti making. It's a more of organizing because you
Hmm.
need raw papaya, you need food color, you need sugar. You boil it and you have tutti frutti. And TK did a market research in Tindigal and realized the bakeries put together typically would need some 5 to 6 kilos of tutti frutti in each shop per week. Each bakery. There are some 50, 60 bakeries. So he'll be able to supply that cheaper than what we are getting. So he managed to get a good order for the Valayapatti production group. So they were supplying it, I remember.
Oh, that's impressive. I didn't realize that they were able to identify Tindikal as a market. I remember the suburb. I remember him giving me a tour of that and showing me a little bit of the process. I also remember a lot of soap manufacture and biogas as well, but perhaps
Yeah.
they were earlier projects from RTC that
No,
continued on.
actually, the soap, the all those bio gas, etc., but traditionally the strength of Gandhigram.
Hmm.
I don't think there was any additional innovation there. He would have probably used the existing. That soap making is a pretty easy activity at a rural level.
Right. Do you remember him bemoaning the fraction of the cost, the final cost that packaging
Mm.
contributed to? He was like, "Oh, the actual soap itself is a very small part of the eventual cost." And I remember him, promoting alternate ideas for packaging, and even a packaging-free
Mm.
solution for selling the soap.
That's more of the pack. TK was like it's a part of his sustainability idea because he realized that packaging is a huge menace. I mean,
Hmm.
it creates a lot of waste than the cost actually. So he was always any technique. He'll be always talking about the packaging free reselling. I mean,
Right.
the technology for doing that, and how to come with your bag, take it, and rather than packing, you create a dispensing machine kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah. Then apart from that, by the time when I was there already, he had a large project from Hutco called Kattida Mayam,
Hmm.
the building center. So he was designing rural schools, offices, and I remember visiting a couple of schools he has designed, and they are low cost. I mean, he would use all the uh, appropriate technology, current in construction, the hollow bricks or the rat trap bond in the walls, the filler blocks on slabs,
Hmm.
on the cost. Like, for example, he will be able to build a school at a fourth of the typical PWD estimate by incorporating the techniques. The most fascinating thing was he, he would question the very teacher's ownership of the blackboard. He says,
Hmm.
why should the teacher have the blackboard? So his school designs round the classroom is the blackboard.
Amazing.
Yeah. So only the front board is for the teacher. All other three sides are the students. So the whole classroom has a very circular, I mean, half the wall is blackboard.
Yeah.
Design it like that. So I was totally fascinated by that. Then I asked, why do you need? Then he says, oh, that the front part is the teachers, the rest is the students. They can do their homework, they can do their drawing, writing, learning.
Collective brainstorming and sharing of ideas. I love it. I didn't realize this. I remember he talked a lot about the low cost and how even for housing for the rural folk, the new designs allowed for buildings to be twice as big as the PWD housing, but
Yeah.
for almost a tenth of the cost. And he and in 10 days, patte naatkalil pattu kattiram, like
Mm.
10 buildings in 10 days,
Yeah.
or such ambitious goals. I remember him working on.
That is more like that started more like after I left the campus, but I remember that story very well. It was taking shape at that point of time when I was studying, but
Yeah.
started far later, little later. But the idea, of course, I mean, he was using a lot of management skills and technique to bring that cost down.
Hmm.
See, PWD estimate has a 30% overhead.
Sure.
Today's construction, he doesn't talk about any overheads. There's no profit. And the
Right.
labor totally comes from the um, contribution of the beneficiary.
Right.
So that is the government.
Participant.
So that way he saves a lot on labor. And all the castings, that the 10 houses in 10 days, you have a lot of common elements. So all this casting is done in a single place.
Hmm.
So the most of the roof is cast on the floor. So how he is managing 10 houses in 10 days. So the casting is done in a almost like one day for all 10 houses, because all
Hmm.
the elements are there, prefab elements are there, just lift it up and finish it. So the
Understood.
building is what where it takes time. But still, that was a wonder actually. I mean, so that happened a little later, but they continued the same strategy when he came back to Gandhigram
Hmm.
as the vice chancellor. So he started a BTech in habitat technology, but I think later the UGC forced him to rename it as civil engineering because they stopped letting the universities name their courses.
I
They said
see.
you have to choose from whatever is existing.
They
But
had to
that
standardize the
technology
offerings.
for a while till that condition came, precondition came. The course was running as BTech Habitat. But that is when he was the vice chancellor. But before that, this project was running under the HUTCO.
Understood. And I remember, like, this was also the time I remember him talking a lot about teaching Tamil. When I visited in 1992, I remember there was a student from North India, someone Jain, a Kumar Jain, maybe. I can't remember the name very well. And he would be trying to read all the Tamil letters on the shop boards and the newspapers,
Mm.
and my dad would proudly point to him as an example of his course being successful. Do you recall anything more about this?
Yeah, he has developed a technique of learning Tamil in 7 days. See, 2 days, two other things, major things apart from like the very technology innovation, he was focusing was technoracy and literacy. So under the literacy, he would be talking about learning to read and write. And the
Mhm,
technoracy is about educating people on technology. It could be as simple as technolacy education could be starting from as simple activities like tying a fuse to handling your own day-to-day affairs in a, whatever is associated with technology. So he was doing that. So he has continuously done the technolacy project for a while in various places. So the
mhm.
literacy under the literacy initiative is what he has brought the seven learn Tamil in 7 days. The very simple techniques. In Tamil, that way alphabet is very easy to write. So
Mhm.
he'll start with the pa, you put it other way around. The ta is the first
Yeah.
simplest thing. Then you lift one more, it becomes pa. Then you
Mhm.
invert it, it becomes something like that, it goes.
Well,
And
yeah.
then you add a additional loop, it becomes sha.
Yeah.
Pull it down, it becomes ta. So he has kind of used that design aspect of that script to make it pretty simple. Put a lot of thought had gone in. And then he would do some demonstrations to non-Tamil people in institutions, saying that okay, I can challenge that I can teach you Tamil in 1 hour to
Hmm.
read the alphabets.
Yeah.
He has done that kind of demonstrations in IITs and probably in some of the American universities also, where he could convince people that letters could be learned in 1 or 2 hours.
Right.
At the end of that, most of the people would be able to write all the letters. So he had that knack. But uh, so that is kind of spread over 7 days for very, I mean, totally illiterate people. So they should
Yeah.
be able. Then he would also, apart from letter is one thing. He would try to introduce the words which are relevant to you. Maybe your temple, your god, your so that the it's easy for people to learn the letters and learn the words rather than
Right.
the traditional textbook method.
Yeah.
And by
Trade
the time
words.
I have reached Gandhigram, I think already uh, Rajani Bakshi, and that is one of the name you should
Hmm.
probably keep track for interviewing.
Yes.
So she had written a book on practicing Gandhians, and the TK was one of the subject in the book. It's published by Penguin. You would have seen that book, right?
I have read it. I certainly intend to follow up with Rajni. A
Either that
wonderful.
happened at that time or more or less around that time. Maybe.
Hmm.
So there, prior to that, obviously, I remember him trying to run some small nursery in your village, Puvankudiyur. He used to call it Maryland. That my memories are from whatever he
I think
told.
with someone called Paul Basker, perhaps. Does that sound right, Reggie? Yeah. I remember he had a someone who shared his vision,
Mm.
who helped to run the school in my grandmother's house.
Okay,
Uh,
okay.
I,
Oh, that
I don't,
is the same Paul Bhaskar, probably, which I was trying to say, the Peace Trust in India.
that's correct. Yeah,
Uh,
though it could be mixing up personalities. I would hate to get that wrong, but I feel like Paul's name came up in the conversation about Maryland. Paul is
possible.
no more, but I spoke with his son a few years ago. I should reconnect with him and see if he can remember any of the details about.
Then these
Okay.
are different poles, because this pole Bhaskar, which I said, the Peace Trust in Dindigal,
Mhm.
is could may not be
The right person.
younger person.
Understood.
Mm.
Understood. Yeah, I'll try to dig more into
Mm.
that little story. Maybe this is a good point to pause for today, Rajay. I would love to dig more into some of the other phases of your interaction with TK, and I know that you both wrote a lot of books together as well and manuscripts, and I'd love to dig a little bit more into those stories in a subsequent set of conversations.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, Rajay. Thank you so much.
Okay. Good, good day to you.